It's 4:20 a.m. Hi, and welcome to episode 6 of the Stoned Witches Hour with Shell and Layla. It's time to get stoned and spooky while we spin ghoulish tales of a house that's a realtor's worst nightmare and a prison that inmates are dying to leave. I'm Layla.
Michelle, and we're going to have a ghosty ghoul time.
Tonight, West Coast is presenting for your ghoulish delights the island of Alcatraz.
And we are going to go on the East Coast to Amityville, New York in Long Island. And we're going to check out, is Amityville Horror House scary or isn't it?
Demon ghosts or no demon ghosts?
Definitely creepy. Yeah.
Straight to creepy.
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, we'll talk about Alcatraz, we'll talk about Amityville, and we'll have a good time. I don't know if you have smoked too much or if you haven't smoked enough.
Oh my goodness. I have not smoked enough, actually. Right now I'm blaming all of this on Mercury retrograde. Mercury is retrograde until February 3rd. And I have had nothing. Usually people are like, hey, it's Mercury retrograde. And I'm like, okay, yeah, whatever. It's a Tuesday. But this particular Mercury retrograde has been fucking with me so hard. Every computer thing that could go wrong is everything's acting weird. Like, you ever call someone and leave a message and then they're like, oh, I never got it.
Yeah.
Shit's been happening to me. Like, all of a sudden my phone will ding and I'll have 3 text messages and 2 phone calls and a voicemail from an hour ago, but I just got them. It has been a day. Let me tell you, it has definitely been a day. But I am back in the office. I just did a dab. I have my bong packed. I have everything ready. We should be good.
I just want it for a second. I would like to say that yesterday I decided to quick check the news online.
Bad idea.
The very first headline story was that Meatloaf had died. And Betty White died. She was great. She was a great person. She was funny. I have laughed at Betty White my whole life.
I know. Love that woman.
Bob Saget. I had watched some Full House as a younger person. And, I knew who he was and I knew the type of person he was. He was definitely one of those actors that the way he was on TV was the way he was in person.
Yeah, he seemed like a great guy. By all accounts, an awesome human.
It's a tragedy that it seems like every day of 2020, we have lost somebody big.
Almost feels like a repeat of 2019.
Yeah, like the Vogue fashion designer, that Spanish singer. Like, folks are just dropping like flies.
Yeah, but that other comedian.
Yeah, Louis Anderson.
Yeah.
But Meatloaf hurt me to my core.
Me too.
It hurt me to my core. And I did a 3-hour Spotify tribute sesh yesterday.
Yeah.
And I just sat here and listened to 3 hours of Meatloaf.
I had a very Columbia moment.
A lot of people don't realize this, but later in his life, in the last 10 or so years, Meatloaf actually got into ghost hunting. He was on Ghost Adventures. I actually saw some episodes of him doing some ghost hunting up in the St. Lawrence in northern New York. And he was actually an avid ghost hunter. I just thought that was a neat thing that not a lot of people knew about Meatloaf.
Oh my gosh, I had no idea.
Yep. He was into paranormal stuff. And I don't know if he was his whole life, but he definitely had participated in some TV shows where they do ghost hunting. I do know Ghost Adventures was definitely one of them. I can't think of the other one, but yeah, he was into the paranormal, the spooky, the ghosty ghouls, just like us in Rocky Horror.
I will miss him.
His sad day.
Wow, I had no idea he was into ghost hunting. I'll have to check out some of those. You said Ghost Adventures?
Yeah, if you just Google Meatloaf and ghost hunting, you'll find it.
Oh, yeah, sad day.
So, what are you smoking today? Because I'm smoking something new. Okay. Sometimes when I go to the store and make my purchases, I'm going for a higher THC content, we'll say.
Sure.
I want the best bang for my buck. Who doesn't? If you're offering 30% and 15%, I'm going for the 30, my friend. So this poked my interests yesterday. It's GMO, rocking at a 32% THC level, which for flower is actually pretty high.
Yeah, that's a decent, you see a lot of 22, 21, 26 sometimes, but 30, you don't see that as often.
It's 32.6, and it's that very, how do I say it? Like a lime green, like that light lime green
What
color.
we used to call kind green.
Yeah. This is kind bud. I haven't heard kind in a long time. God, we're
Right?
old.
Swag green and kind green. Two
Yeah.
different colors.
This was definitely kind green. It's like that limey green that has that like haze of white crystal over
Mm.
it, kind of like the nuggets. All I can think of is popcorn chicken. Not the big.
Like little uniform nuggets all over, just coated in
Yeah, as opposed
sugar.
to like get a big old huge bud, it's more like
Mhm.
little nuggets. Tastes a little piney, which who cares? It's weed.
That's probably the terpene pinene, and it's good for you. It's good for anti-anxiety and anti-inflammatory.
It's not like it's going to taste like anything in the name. We had that conversation about banana kush last time.
Right.
Yeah, so it's got like the little bowl size buds.
Nice. Yes. That's funny. That looks a lot like my Bruce Banner. Same thing. It's the light kind green covered in crystal kind of thing.
But this looks like it's a whole bud right here. And this is like maybe an inch and a half big. So it's definitely more like popcorn chicken than like chicken strips.
Right.
Why do I measure weed based on chicken? Is that weird?
Why do you measure weed based on food?
That's true.
We're talking popcorn, nuggets. Do you have the munchies, Shell?
I need to get out my everything pretzel crisps.
We're doing the everything crisps again. People are going to think that they sponsor us or something. Maybe they should.
They don't, but I would like to, if there's anybody out there listening that is in any way, shape, or form associated with Snack Factory, look a bitch up.
Yeah, she's not picky. She'll eat all of it. My new obsession right now are these dark chocolate covered mandarin slices.
Oh my God, that sounds delightful.
They are so good. They come in these teeny tiny packages, and it's probably a good thing. But, it's dried mandarin orange slices covered in really good dark chocolate. And oh my God, I could just eat those all day long. They're so good.
See, now I would think that it would be good if they were still like juicy so that when you bite through the chocolate, you get this like, that orange juice squirt.
You almost do.
That orange juice squirt.
Mandarin orange. This sounds terrible. Oh.
You're killing me. They're moist.
Yeah, no, that's also not a word that's going on this podcast. They're really good. Yeah. You don't get that squirt of the orange, but delicious nonetheless.
I actually, it's Valentine's Day soon. You know how they put Valentine's Day candy out at like Thanksgiving now.
Mm-hmm.
I have gotten these Ghirardelli dark chocolate raspberry filled hearts. I love these.
I found, to coin one of your phrases, especially as I've gotten older, I really like dark chocolate much better. It has to be good chocolate. Like it can't be shitty. I'm sorry, Hershey's, but your chocolate's not that great. Life's too short for shitty chocolate.
We were actually, born and raised in the Northeast, so it was kind of ingrained in us that you had to think Hershey's
was good. Yeah, that's what we were taught.
Hershey's not bad, but there's a million better, and Ghirardelli is one of them. So what are you smoking today? I talked about my GMO indica 32% awesomeness. What's in the bong today?
Well, do you like my little bong?
I do like that bong.
Did you watch that show?
The White Lotus from HBO?
No.
So good. Oh my gosh. The teenage girls, the daughter and her friend smuggled this bong on the plane to their vacation. So yeah, my bong is famous. Except not this piece, because of course we broke that years ago.
Everybody breaks hitter pieces. So what were you talking about today?
Today, I'll be talking about Alcatraz. Alcatraz Island surprisingly has a long history as a prison, not only a prison, but a haunted place. From the first time that the Native Americans were in that area, it has a reputation. Alcatraz Island is best known for being a harsh, inescapable prison. Maybe I shouldn't have done that, Deb. Alcatraz Island is best known for being a harsh, inescapable prison that housed the worst of the worst criminals. As I was digging into Alcatraz, it just got creepier and creepier the further down that I went. I was quite surprised to find out that it has been a prison almost the entire time that people have been around.
Now it's on an island, right?
It is. It's a very small island. It's like 1.3 square miles or something. It's not very big at all. When it was first found, well, okay, it wasn't really first found, but when Spanish explorers first came to the San Francisco Bay Area, they saw this small island basically rising up out of the fog. And even then, they thought it was eerie. The ship's logs from the time talk about how they saw strange lights on the island and how it had, and I quote, like literally in their log, it says they thought it was a bad place. The indigenous people there at the time had obviously known about this island long before the explorers got there. And to them, it was an evil place. They said that it was a place where evil spirits would dwell. And they would sometimes send people who had done bad things there to kind of like think about what they had done on this island of evil spirits.
So was it at that point, was it just basically like a bunch of rocks sticking out of the water?
Yeah, it was a big barren rock that had nothing on it, nothing growing on it. And even back before the 1700s, when the Spanish explorers found it, the Native Americans were using it basically as a prison. Like I said, they said that they felt that evil spirits dwelled there.
And that's San Francisco Bay, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
So it's located barely a mile and a half off the shore, just this little rock. And it was even considered evil back when the Native Americans were the only ones who knew about it. And they kind of used it as a prison. They would send people there who had been bad or who needed to be punished to go kind of be with these evil spirits and face their punishment.
Now I have a question.
Sure.
I have a question because
I have a bong.
So whether it's a prison in modern times or a native quote unquote prison where they would just ship people to the island to think about their bad doings, I gotta say, a mile and a half, even at my current age, and more so when I was younger, I could swim that.
Yes.
I could swim that. That was gym class in 11th grade. A mile and a half, that's nothing.
Part of the problem is the water is so cold. You're going to get hypothermia within a very short time of being in the water. It's absolutely frigid, and the currents are very strong and unpredictable. So sending somebody out there, if you tried to swim and you weren't in excellent shape and prepared, very much prepared for how cold the water gets, you'd get hypothermia and the current would take you and you'd drown.
I would think in California it'd be warm water.
You'd think, but it is not that warm, especially that far north. The waters are frigid all year round. And actually, one of the things about Alcatraz is it was one of the few prisons that allowed their prisoners to have hot showers. And the idea was so that they would not acclimate to the cold water and would be less likely to be able to swim to shore.
Wow.
Yeah, kind of one of the weird little torture things that they did.
I always wondered that about Alcatraz. I'm like, why do they make it sound like it's so hard to get out of? These people break out of prison at prisons all over the country. Just swim the mile.
Nope.
But I guess that makes sense.
We'll get into people that I think actually did escape, but no one ever escaped. People were shot. They were drowned in the water. They, froze in the water. It just didn't happen, except for possibly, again, 3 people. That movie, Escape from Alcatraz, was about those. Did you ever see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, those 3 guys. That was a true story.
When was the actual prison built?
Again, it's been basically a prison from day one. The Native Americans used it to banish people there. They've found artifacts and bones dating from that time period. So they know that something to that effect is true. Because of where it is positioned, it was turned into a fortress that kind of guards the mouth of the San Francisco Bay. And so the military started to build fortresses there almost as soon as they found it. And especially once the gold rush hit in 1849, California was vulnerable. And so they started putting cannons and actual fortifications on that island so that if any ships coming in, they'd be able to get them from there. But the place is so hard to build on. Everything has to be ported in. All food, all water, all building materials have to be brought in by boat. And so it's kind of expensive to do it. The place has always been military of some sort. And they did build, what do you call military prisons? Garrisons or something? I don't know. But they built military prisons, brigs. There you go. So they built military prisons along with other fortifications and barracks there in 1849. And they had cannons there at that time. They started with 11 and ended up with 111 by the time they were done.
Damn.
So they did keep military prisoners there at that time. And then when the Civil War happened, then it became a Confederate prisoner dumping ground. And they were kept in absolutely horrific conditions, like in these tiny, cold, damp stone cells, basically shackled, hand to foot in these cramped little places. And as you can imagine, a lot of people died. There's no fresh water there. So they were forced to drink contaminated water. And this place has just been a site of confinement and death from its very beginnings and kind of seeped into the stones. So after the Civil War, it stayed being a military prison. They would dump like deserters there, and U.S. military soldiers that had long sentences would get sent to Alcatraz. And it was actually prisoners that built the first prison there.
Oh, wow.
So it was a military prison from 1907 till roughly 1930 when it became the federal prison that we're all familiar with now. So Indigenous Americans used it as a prison and just had the evil spirits here teach people a lesson. And then the first Americans came here and started turning it into a prison to absolutely torture the fuck out of people.
So that was actually a federal prison, or was that a state prison?
Federal. It became a federal prison in 1930.
And that was like a big gangster time frame, a lot of gangsters in America. So who's been there? You're gonna have to tell us.
Well, see, here's the thing. Unless you're kind of into, I don't know, 30s, 40s criminals, these names might not sound familiar. Some of them are pretty famous, so they will. Like Scarface Al Capone. That's a name.
Okay.
Machine Gun Kelly, not the current one.
Not the current one.
Right. And Robert Stroud, the Birdman of Alcatraz. A lot of people have heard of him.
Yep. The Birdman.
Arthur Doc Barker.
Not sure who that is.
No, I'm not familiar with that name either, but he's one of the famous ones too. And Whitey Bulger, which sort of rings some bells. I think he's still alive, or was up until recently.
He just recently died. And, we've talked about this a gazillion times, but I've recently moved to the greater Boston area. And Whitey Bulger was actually, like, his whole crime life was here in Boston. So you can't be around here and not know who he is even now.
Gotcha. So even though there were like a handful of, quote unquote, famous people there, none of them died there, although one of them is rumored to still haunt the showers. One of the things with Alcatraz is they decided to make it a prison's prison. You weren't sentenced to go to Alcatraz. Basically, it was any prisoner who was unruly or couldn't follow prison rules was sent to Alcatraz to kind of shape up and learn how to follow rules.
Like the worst of the worst?
The worst of the worst, absolutely. One of the people who was considered the worst of the worst was Al Capone. And Ooh. Al Capone was sent there, I think, more as a PR move. They wanted to be seen as being tough on organized crime.
Right.
And so even though he wasn't, his biggest rule breaking things were that he got privileges and extra phone calls and food brought into him and clothes brought into him in the prison. Basically, he was treated like a king behind prison walls.
Right.
And so it wasn't necessarily that he was the worst of the worst, but
they needed him to send a message.
That's right. I believe he was prisoner like number 85. So he was one of the first people to get there. And they had made it purposefully austere. Again, they wanted to teach these guys a lesson. They wanted to make sure that they learned to follow the rules of prisons, and they wanted to break them.
So Al Capone was prisoner 85?
He actually didn't do too bad. There's a ghost story associated with Al Capone. There's a lot of little ghost stories here. Some are scarier than others, but
Did he die there?
He did not. He did go crazy there, though. He had, by all reports, he had syphilis and that had been untreated. And so he, once it gets to your brain, you're pretty much screwed. And so he was dying and going crazy of that. But he did manage to start a band in prison along with Machine Gun Kelly, the gangster one. But they started a band, and Al Capone played banjo. He taught himself how to play banjo. And funnily enough, there are reports of people who think they hear banjo music coming from the men's shower. Well, they were all men's, but coming from the showers. They would think they would hear banjo music. And
Oh,
yeah, come to find out, Al Capone requested and received permission to spend his like 1 hour a day outside his cell practicing his banjo in the showers because he was afraid of getting beat up if he went out to the yard.
so basically, Al Capone's playing the banjo while people are yanking it in the shower.
And he is still providing the soundtrack today. Oh no. Other than Al Capone possibly playing the banjo, none of the famous people that were there haunt the area. Most of the hauntings come from other incidences. Most of the 1,576 prisoners who spent time at Alcatraz, not one of them were famous or big level gangsters or anything. They were just regular old prisoners that happened to not conform to the rules and regulations of the prison that they had been assigned to, or possibly were violent and dangerous or an escape risk.
How long was this place open?
Not very long. I mean, it was set up to be a prison, like a prison's prison. You know, kind of like if you were already in prison but needed to go somewhere worse, they sent you to Alcatraz. Yeah. So it was from 1934 to 1963. It operated as a federal penitentiary. So what is that? 29 years-ish? Yeah.
That's not a lot.
Yeah, that's not a very long time at all. And in its time, it was definitely considered to be inescapable. It had a reputation of being this harsh, completely unable to escape from prison. Have you ever heard any rumors about people about how like it was inescapable? Like, have you ever heard anything about it?
I actually have. I've heard that people ran the risk of being attacked by sharks as well in that water.
Oh, that's what I was hoping you would say.
between the harsh temperature conditions of the water that you spoke about. So you're either going to freeze your ass off or you're going to get your ass bit off by a shark.
Yes. And that's exactly the type of rumors that they perpetuated. However, there are no
hypothermia or jaws.
Yeah, but there's no sharks that are going to bite you in the San Francisco Bay. The only sharks that are there are like, they're like carp, you know, they're like bottom feeders. They don't bite people.
I was thinking like jaws.
Yeah,
like
no,
that's the idea they must have planted
very much
in
so
the greater minds of people. Now you said you had a story of someone who could have potentially escaped.
Yes, I do actually. We'll get to that in just a minute. Actually, let's get to it now. So the myth of the waters being unswimmable with man-eating sharks was definitely fake. So there were 3 guys, actually 4 tried, but he didn't make it through. Frank Morris and brothers John and Clarence Anglin for years plotted an escape that was famed in this movie, Escape from Alcatraz. So these guys, one of which was super smart, Frank Morris, had a genius level IQ, and he was always escaping. And that's why he got sent to Alcatraz, which was considered inescapable. So they picked up like these hacksaws that had been from the work area that had been kind of laid aside, and they dug through their air vents to make them wide enough to like squeeze through. They made dummies of their heads. So when the guards went to do head count at night, they'd be in their beds. They stole raincoats and hid them in the vents where they would meet, and they sewed the raincoats together and used the hot steam from the vents to like vulcanize the rubber and to seal the seams, and created an inflatable raft. They stole wood and made oars. Again, this was a plan years in the making. And when the night came to escape, one of the guys wasn't able to fit through his vent hole, so he had to stay behind. But the 2 brothers and Frank Morris were able to leave. It wasn't noticed until morning that they had gone, and they were never found. Pieces of their raft and pieces of the oar were found, but no bodies or anything were ever found, and they were assumed drowned. However, they're still listed on a wanted, like FBI wanted list. Interestingly,
oh wow,
John and Clarence Anglin's, one of their relatives said that their grandmother received a bouquet of flowers every year signed from John, like after they had escaped. And also the FBI received a letter. I think it was in 2015 or 2016. They received a letter that was supposedly from one of the brothers saying that he was still alive, that he had cancer, and that he would turn himself in if they promised to only put him in jail for 1 year and to give him treatment for his cancer. Handwriting experts checked the handwriting and it was deemed inconclusive. This letter also said that Frank Morris had died and was buried under a different name in Argentina. The other brother had died in Brazil. Also, interestingly, at one time in 2015, a photo came out that was supposedly taken in 1975 of the two brothers when they were living in Brazil. And recently, facial analysis has been done. You know how like Google Photos can figure out who you are, like when you were 3.
Yeah.
They did so they did facial recognition on several photos of these brothers and compared it to the one that came from 1975, and it was determined that it is them. So it's entirely possible they did survive the crossing and did make it out and live their lives on the run. So, okay, so there's the escapees, but there's so much more to Alcatraz than just being a prison that was unable to be escaped from. Apparently, even ghosts couldn't get away from the place.
Who's still living in Alcatraz right now?
Even while it was a prison, the guards and the wardens at the time had ghost stories to tell because it was considered to be haunted even then.
So it's basically been considered kind of haunted from the get-go?
Since the Native Americans said that they felt that evil spirits dwelt there, they thought it was haunted, and they talked about it back in the 1700s. So it's been haunted for hundreds of years. Here's my oranges. All right. So even while it was a prison, the guards and the prisoners had lots of stories to tell of hauntings. So it was extremely harsh for prisoners having to stay there. All privileges had to be earned. They lived in these teeny tiny cells. They basically weren't allowed to do anything. It was pretty monotonous. If they broke any of the rules, since they were sent there to kind of be retrained to follow the rules, if they broke any rules, they would have extreme punishments, including being put in solitary confinement. And these ranged from regular solitary confinement from a very bare cell where they had no privileges to an extremely bare cell that was called the hole, that had literally nothing in it except a hole in the center of the floor for them to go to the bathroom. They'd be stripped naked, put in there, and only given bread and water twice a day.
No shit.
That
sucks.
Now,
I would think that'd make them crazy. Wouldn't it make them crazy?
It did make a lot of them crazy. Quite a few people went crazy in there. And it was kind of a running joke amongst the guards. They would talk about the thing. Apparently, a lot of prisoners that would go into the cells in D Block would talk about a black mist, a figure made of just like black smoke or black mist that had red glowing eyes. It was mentioned so often by prisoners that were in the hole that the guards made a big joke about it. It was a running joke. One night, there was a prisoner put in cell D14, and he starts screaming about there's something in the cell with him, and he keeps seeing this thing with red glowing eyes. And of course, the guards just figure it's same old dumb story, prisoners being idiots in cell block.
And the guards don't give a shit.
They didn't give a shit. They were just annoyed because this guy wouldn't shut up.
Right.
So sometime around the witching hour, he finally does shut up, just suddenly quiet. In the morning, when they go to check on him, they find the guy dead in the middle of the locked cell with strangulation marks, bruises all around his neck.
But he was alone.
He was all alone, and the cell door was locked. All the guards had been accounted for. Who could have gotten in there? The autopsy report determined that he had been strangled, that he had been strangled, and that he hadn't done it himself. He could not have done it himself. Again, all the guards had been accounted for, and no one could figure out who did it. It was so suspicious that they did an investigation, and it was inconclusive. Interestingly, once after they found the body, they had all the prisoners line up and did a head count, and they counted the exact number of prisoners that they should have, as if the dead guy was still there. Supposedly,
that's freaky.
According to reports, everyone saw the dead guy in line. And when they all turned to look at him, he disappeared. They did head count again, and they were the number they should have been, one short.
I would have been like, look, I will go to any other prison and follow any rule. Get me the hell out.
Right? Oh, when visitors go to that room D14, it's 20 degrees colder than the rest of the cells. You can literally feel the temperature change when you go into it.
Can you still go on tours there?
You can go on self-guided tours and walk around. You can even go on late night tours, which is kind of fun.
Oh, wow. That's got to be creepy.
It really is. It really is. Some of those cells are so creepy that park rangers will refuse to go in them alone. There are reports of different guards, ghosts of guards being seen walking around, but also sightings of Native Americans walking around. Interestingly, one of the first Warden Johnston, does not believe in ghosts. I don't know why that's always noted, but every time they talk about Warden Johnson, it's mentioned that he doesn't believe in ghosts. And apparently it's documented that one time he was leading a tour of the prison, some high muckety mucks kind of showing him around. And as they're walking through the prison, the entire group heard the unmistakable sound of a woman crying. And the sound seemed to be coming from the very walls. And it got louder and louder until it suddenly stopped and an icy cold wind blew through the whole group.
Oh, wow.
No one could explain it. Not one guest wanted to continue with the tour, and the warden and none of the guests could ever explain what happened.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, no woman has ever been a guard or a prisoner on Alcatraz. Some of those prisoners would go their entire time there without hearing the voice of a female. So who knows who that woman could have been.
Wow, that could have been like maybe a Native American one.
Could have been, yes. And during a Christmas party at that same warden's house, several guards told a story of a time, they're all having this party, hanging out. Through the doorway comes a man wearing an old-fashioned gray suit with a brimmed cap and mutton chops, like he was from the 1800s. When everyone noticed him, it disappeared and the fire went out in the stove. So very weird events. In the laundry room of C Block, it was documented by several of the guards that on more than one occasion, it would smell like there was a fire in that room, and they'd rush down, they'd see smoke, they'd smell fire. But when they'd open the doors, it was gone completely. No fire, no smoke.
That would make me kind of panicky. Because I'd always be concerned that something is burning.
I think so too. And visitors now very often report smelling smoke in that area. That area also, a lot of people would report seeing like kind of a menacing figure there. And a psychic went through, Sylvia Brown, and she was, when she went through, she had a former inmate with her, and she felt a menacing presence there as well. And she got the name The Butcher. The gentleman that was with her said that there was I think his name was A.B. Morowitz, who had been a hitman for the mafia, supposedly, and his nickname was The Butcher, and he had been killed in that room.
Oh, shit. Shit.
So that might be the figure that people see there. There's other ghosts. So these two prisoners, Rufus McCain and Henry Young, along with this other guy, Arthur Barker, and two other men tried to escape. They managed to get to shore, like to the shore of the island.
Right.
Before the guards caught up with him. And McCain realized he wasn't able to swim, and that kind of stalled the whole group. So two guards got killed. The one inmate, Barker, was killed. McCain and Young were put in solitary for almost an entire year. Young was pissed. Yeah, Young was pissed, and he blamed McCain because he's like, how the fuck could you forget you didn't know how to swim before we got there? So he was so mad, and the tension between the two just escalated and escalated until like a few months later, Young snuck out of where he was working and crept down to the office or to the shop where McCain was working and stabbed him in the gut with a shiv. And
oh, damn.
Yeah, McCain did not die immediately, but he had a very serious injury, and he lived for a few painful hours before dying in agony in the hospital.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, I know. Crazy, right? A lot of
people.
What a way
to go.
Awful way to go. And all because the dude lied about being able to swim or something. Like, how do we forget something like that? But they see McCain.
The whole way of escaping via water would probably involve a little bit of swimming.
Yeah, right. Some ghost sightings of a prisoner in uniform clutching his stomach and running towards a door only to disappear as he gets to the door has been reported by multiple people.
Wow. Now, has there been a lot of like, I'm kind of curious, does it seem to be more, I don't know, I guess I'm kind of torn. Is it more Native American haunted, or does it seem to be more prisoner haunted?
Well, I think probably what happened, it seems to be more prisoner haunted. Most of the sightings seem to be prisoners or soldiers, particularly from the time when it was a military fort and it was a military prisoner, like a prisoner of war station.
Gotcha.
because those buildings are still, a lot of them are still like basements parts of the prison system, or some of the buildings that are there now. And it was even occupied by Native Americans who were trying to reclaim it for a short period of time. But you had mentioned earlier about people going crazy, the possibility of people going crazy there. And while some prisoners did say that Alcatraz for them wasn't all bad, again, the hot showers, which was unusual in the privacy, for others, it was absolute hell on earth. And it was so bad for some people that they literally went insane during their incarceration. And it led a few of them to self-mutilation and suicide.
Self-mutilation?
Yes.
Why?
Apparently, it was so bad that they were willing to do anything to get out of it. One prisoner, Rube Percival, chopped off all the fingers of his left hand with a hatchet while he was working in one of the wood shops. And when the guard rushed over, nobody knows. When the guard rushed over to stop him, he handed the guard the hatchet while grinning maniacally and asked the officer to chop off the fingers of his other hand for him.
Oh my God.
Another prisoner. God. Yeah, right. Another prisoner.
No mental health care at that place.
None whatsoever. None. And the torment that these people went through to drive them to that type of energy is still bouncing around in there. And this one prisoner, Ed Woodkey, used a pencil sharpener blade to slice his own jugular in order to kill himself.
Oh, shit. That's some like initiative.
That's really taking the things that you have at hand. Like Joe Bowers, he used his own eyeglass lenses to try and cut his throat. When that didn't work, he rushed a fence and climbed it, knowing that he'd be shot. When a guard demanded that he climb down, he didn't. He refused and was indeed shot and fell 75 feet to his death.
Because they probably thought that it was easier to die than live out their sentence there.
Yeah, a small group at one time, a small group of prisoners in an attempt to escape overpowered some guards and grabbed their keys and tried to get out that way, only to find out they had the wrong keys. They didn't have like a key to the outside door. So they essentially barricaded themselves in a dead end alley and held the prison for like 2 days while they fought with guards. Eventually the Marines were sent in and, a bunch of prisoners died. Guards died. They executed a couple of the prisoners for it.
How did they really think that was going to end? Honestly.
Yeah, they figured they did try to negotiate with the guys and they knew at that point that they weren't getting out alive. And so they basically were like, I'm going to die anyway. So this is the way I'm going to do it. So Alcatraz, in its time, Alcatraz saw 8 murders, 5 suicides, 15 die of natural causes, 36 escape attempts. And supposedly none have successfully escaped, except for those 3.
I was going to say, even though you said that potentially 3 could have.
Yeah. Of those escape attempts, 23 were recaptured, 6 were shot and killed, and there's 5 that are still listed as missing and assumed to have drowned, including the 3 gentlemen that.
Wow.
Yeah. I think they lived. I think that guy was alive at least until 2015.
Well, and his grandma got flowers.
Right. And I think
his mom.
I don't remember who it was. It was a relative. Who knows if that was true or not.
It sounds like regardless. I mean, it's got a lot of paranormal activity, a lot of people stuck there.
Oh yeah. I wanted to say I forgot there was there's even reports of in like logs, there's reports of guards hearing cannon and gunfire with people screaming to the point where someone would hit the deck or get under cover only to find nothing. And that happened on multiple occasions where they would hear
probably from the Civil War time.
The old Civil War cannons. Right.
Yeah.
And there was an old lighthouse. The first lighthouse that was built there was damaged and later torn down to make way for a bigger lighthouse that was built in a better spot. But there are quite a few reports of people hearing a strange noise, including a guard. Like a guard actually mentioned this before he quit, said back in the 1930s, he heard a weird noise like moaning and went to go see what it was, saw a strange green light. It looked like an outline of a lighthouse, and then heard like a lighthouse fog horn noise before it disappeared. And that type of sighting has been repeated. Even now, people will talk about seeing the old lighthouse and hearing it. And it's just a quick noise. Cool. What I like about that one is even the old legends from the Native Americans that had been there and the the Spanish explorers that came later would talk about the eerie lights and the eerie noises from the island. So I almost wonder if like people are saying lighthouse
That's what it
because that's what
was.
we're familiar with, but it was just the same lights and noises that have been there for hundreds of years.
Wow, that's cool. That's cool.
Interesting place, and it's got such a long history of being a prison and being a bad place. It's almost like it draws, I don't know, for some reason everybody that goes there wants to imprison people there. It's just odd. Creepy place. We should go.
Perfect smoke for a spooky story.
What about this? So tell me about this blueberry jackrabbit.
Yeah, blueberry jack hair.
Now you grew this, right?
Yes, this is some more of my homegrown. So I have an abundance of that. We did, however, hook up with our favorite delivery service last night, and we got ourselves 2 grams of shatter. 1 gram of, 1 gram of SFV.
Oh, I love SFV.
Yeah, which is so funny because that's San Fernando Valley. We could go there.
Ooh. I never knew what it stood for. I was just like, why do they call this shit SFV?
Yeah, San Fernando Valley. And some wedding cake, I think.
Wedding cake is always a good one.
Right. Can't go wrong. Can't go wrong. So I'll be doing dabs as well.
Yeah. Oh my God. My story, total flop.
What?
It sounds like the Lutz family made half of it up. There was some stuff that happened, but they embellished on it greatly. And there hasn't really been anything that's happened since through 5 owners. And it might not be as haunted as people think. The punchline is I don't think that the Amityville house is as haunted as people think it is, which is almost a disappointment. But you got to investigate to know.
I like that. I like that. And it's okay. It's okay if we investigate these things and then find out that that they're not true. That's okay.
But my whole life, I thought that this was like some demon portal to hell. And now I'm not so sure.
Yeah. I thought we lived right next to the mouth of hell.
And now I'm not so sure.
Yeah. I figured at any time, it's kind of like quicksand. I thought quicksand was going to be much more prevalent. I was pretty damn sure because of the Amityville house that it was entirely possible that every other house you bought was going to be demon infested, ghost infested, and you were going to have to leave in the middle of the night in fear.
Especially if it had those fan-shaped attic windows.
Oh, yeah. Any windows that look like eyes, haunted house, 100%. That's child me convinced.
But yeah, no, like the kid in me, the teenager in me, the young adult in me was heartbroken to find out that everything I had always thought about that house could potentially be more embellished than what really is going on.
Well, I love that you looked into it and that we're going to learn about it.
And I actually have a eyewitness account of, yes, there was some stuff going on, but it was definitely embellished for the book and the movies.
Oh, wow. An eyewitness account. All right. Well, I'm intrigued. Okay. So it might not be real ghost stories, but, human deception is spooky enough.
Yeah. And again, there was definitely something, but maybe not to the extent that society thinks. It was basically like the guy, George, had married this girl that already had kids. So the kids weren't his kids. So the kid said, as an adult, he said in like 2005, did an interview that his stepdad was very much into the occult and witchcraft and summoning stuff, and that they were poor. Something happened and they were in a lot of debt. So he basically, there are some things that happened. And then when he found out he could get a book deal on it, he embellished a lot to get $300,000 to get himself out of debt. So it would almost, it's like a trickle out of a sink versus Niagara Falls. Like, yeah, there were some ghosty things and they were scared and they did flee because they were frightened, but there wasn't shit oozing from the walls and stuff like that. He was just trying to make money to get out of debt from a writer.
I gotcha.
It's kind of an interesting thing if you're not really familiar with the real backstory.
There's so many stories.
This isn't a necessarily old story. When you think about it, the events that The events of the story that we knew happened in a very short amount of time in the not too distant past.
Oh, really?
1970, yeah, yeah. Everything was fine and dandy at this place until 1974. So we're really only talking, what, 47, 48 years ago, which, in the whole grand scheme of things is really only my lifetime.
Right. It's not that long ago at all.
But 1974, there was a family there, the Defoes, owned this house. And this house is in Amityville, New York. We're again going to New York. New York has so many ghost stories.
Yeah, it's a very rich history.
So this is actually, if you're not familiar with where Amityville, New York is, it's about 30 miles outside of New York City on Long Island, kind of the Long Island typical town. But yeah, so November of 1974, there was a family lived there, the Defoes, and they had, I don't know, a bunch of children, 4, 5, 6 children. And their oldest son, Ronald Jr., was 23 years old, still lived in the house. He got drunk one night and came home and murdered his whole family with a Marlin rifle.
Holy fucking shit.
So the oldest son,
Talk about should have smoked a joint. Damn.
right? Chill the freak out. It's 1974. Roll one.
What the fuck? Why was he so mad at his family?
That I've never really been able to kind of figure out. I didn't really delve too much into the info on his trial. But if you do Google him, there's a lot of info on his trial. I just kind of didn't go that route because I was looking more to see the root of what makes this place supposedly scary. Honestly, I cannot answer that for you, but if you Google it, you'll find it. So yeah, so the oldest kid comes home drunk one night, murders the whole place. Actually killed most of his family while they were sleeping in their beds.
Wow. Yeah, that's some deep-seated shitheadedness.
Kind of shitty. Like most of his siblings were shot in the back of the head, face down, laying in bed. They're sleeping in bed and he just walked up and blew their head off, kind of shit.
Now, how many people roughly? Because, I mean, a shotgun blast isn't quiet. You'd think after the first one, someone would have woken up.
I believe it was 4 siblings and both of his parents. So 6 people, at least 6 shots.
Okay.
1974 Long Island, we're not talking the middle of nowhere. I don't know where the neighbors were, but, supposedly, we're going back to tying it into how we find some of these things prevalent throughout each story we do. This also was supposed to happen at the witching hour. So apparently it was about 3:15 a.m. when this occurred. But I would still think at 3:15 a.m. in a quiet suburb, somebody would wake up when they hear 6 rifle shots.
Yeah, you'd think.
Apparently not. The 4 siblings, the 2 parents, investigators did seem to think that one of the parents and one of the siblings were awake when they were shot.
That makes sense because honestly, after the first 2, someone's bound to have woken up. So I'm not surprised that the last couple of people were probably awake and saw him coming with the shotgun.
And so, you can imagine, if you have done any looking into of how ghosty type things can tend to occur, paranormal stuff can tend to occur, traumatic death can kind of keep these things lingering. And as you can see, you got six people and at least 2 of them saw it coming. Very traumatic deaths. So, 1974, family of 6 tragically murdered in their home.
That's terrible. Terrible history right there.
That's enough right there to kind of leave a mark. We've talked in the past on how some of this stuff can kind of, quote unquote, seep into the walls. This is one of those things that can kind of seep into the walls,
Yeah. Whatever emotions he was feeling, whatever drove him to commit such a horrific act. And then the fear, the death, that's a lot of energy to expend in one place, a lot of negative energy.
And I mean, we've all kind of had experiences of being at a location where someone has passed away. And you do kind of get that eerie, someone died there kind of feeling. You know what I mean?
Yeah, even if you don't know, there's a lot of reports where people don't even know that someone died in that place and they can still feel how oppressive it is.
Right. So 13 months later, so the house is abandoned, who's buying a house a week after this happens? Nobody. 13 months goes by. This is where the Lutz family comes into play. The Lutz family is the famous family that you've heard of in the book and in the series of movies. These folks purchased the house. So you figure at this point, you're looking at like what? December of 1975. Okay.
Were they aware of the history of the house when they bought it, or had that been hidden from them?
That was never necessarily laid out in any of the research I did. I'm not saying that that information isn't out there, but I did not come across that information. More what I came across was, obviously no one wants to buy the murder house.
Right.
So the price had been drastically reduced. The Lutzes were newlyweds, but Mrs. Lutz had some children from a previous relationship. So they were instantly a family with children. It wasn't like they were newlyweds, but there was children involved, is my point.
Right. Instant family.
Instant family. Money's tight but yet you need space for people. So it seemed more like the Lutzes found a really great house, perfect size, enough bedrooms, and a price they could afford in a area where you wouldn't necessarily find a home for that price kind of deal.
Gotcha.
They get this, and obviously the price was reduced because of the murders. But this is where
nobody's going to want to pay market price for a house that's like got blood spattered walls. Can you imagine like the realtor going through there and being like, and this is the room where the youngest children were brutally murdered in their beds. And here's the master. Right. So nice and easy to clean bloodstains off the wall. What's the selling point for that?
It's like trying to sell the couch from the Lizzie Borden house with a dad. Like, come on.
Yeah. Can you see that yard sale? Yeah. I don't think people are going to appreciate what happened there. I mean, nobody wants to be associated with that. The price cut must have been really steep for them to overlook the fact that this was like a death house.
Right. Now, this is where things get kind of a little interesting. As you know from the movie and the books, the Lutz family only lasted in the house 28 days before abandoning it. Like, these folks did not even take their underwear. They just walked out.
Left everything.
Walked out of the house and left it all. 28
You said food in the fridge?
Food in the fridge, man. They walked out.
Wow. So what the hell happened to make them run like that?
Imagine, you buy this house, you just get married, you have these children, insta family.
You get a sweet deal of a blood-soaked house.
And you only make it 28 days.
Wow. That house is gorgeous too. Huge house, big windows. I mean, stunning.
Now, this is where things get a little interesting. So the father, George Lutz, claimed that immediately within the first night or two of moving in, that he was woken up at 3:15 a.m. every morning, which again, like I said, was supposedly around the time.
That's when the kid killed his family.
That Ronald Defoe carried out the murder.
Holy shit. Wow.
Yep.
So he fucking imagine.
I would be freaked out. Okay. Yeah. Freaked out.
Yeah, that's your first clue. That's like the subtle warning that the house is giving you that you should get the fuck out. They're like, hey, I'm going to wake you up at the time that these murders happened. It's a hint.
Oh, no, it gets worse.
Oh, boy.
So the Lutz family also claimed to smell some strange odors you can't describe, not like dirty feet or rotten milk, like just strange odors that couldn't be described. They claimed that green slime would ooze out of the walls in the keyholes.
Keyholes too? Like the walls? Yeah. And ew.
Because you remember, you got to figure a house like this probably had those old, the skeleton key locks.
That's so gross. Green ooze. I thought it was blood. I thought I heard something, or maybe it was in the movie, it was something about like blood from the faucets or the walls. Was it really just green ooze?
What I read on the biography.com website was green slime ooze.
Yeah, that's gross.
They claimed to experience cold spots, which we're all familiar with cold spots when it comes to paranormal activity. This is where you kind of, the little things that make you go, huh. So Mrs. Lutz was a quasi-religious folk, she was getting a little freaked out. So she ended up asking a priest to come in and bless the house. And back then, that was kind of a common thing. Nowadays, I don't know if you'd have a priest come bless your
Not
house.
as common. I
Not
hear
as
that
common.
occasionally, but not very, very often.
So she asked this priest to come and bless the house because she's getting a little wigged out. Now, the
But
priest,
honestly, I would ask somebody to come over and be like, hey, I need you to come do a full scale cleansing on this house because I keep waking
right?
up at 3:15 and there's green shit oozing out the walls. I
I
mean,
guess when you put it that way, I'd be like, yeah.
then yeah, I'm having a bitch come over and do a cleansing.
So this is where we start getting a couple other people's accounts of paranormal activity other than the Lutzes themselves. So this priest, I'm not terribly familiar with Catholic house blessings, but apparently he was going like room to room, doing his thing, gets to a certain room in the house, and the priest allegedly heard a voice scream, "Get out."
That's the big clue.
This priest actually told the Lutzes to never sleep in that particular room. Now, what kind of priest is that? Why are you saying get out? It said get out, don't ever come back. Like why is you, oh, just don't sleep in that room.
Don't sleep in that room. Now you're a big fan, and I tend to agree that, if one area of a house is haunted, the whole
thing is what you think
the
that
whole
ghost
house is
is just
haunted.
staying in that bedroom.
Yeah, and I can understand the activity might be centered in one spot or might be strongest in one area. Sure, that makes total sense. But you're not going to get away from demons if you sleep one bedroom over.
Okay, people, all I've got to say is just shutting the door doesn't lock the demon in your bedroom.
However, covering yourself in your blankets is absolute protection. That is
absolute protection.
Yes. So doors, no; blankets, yes.
So the priest, in my opinion, was no particular help because his parting words were just to never sleep in that particular room of the house. To me, red flag. Although
big red flag.
I'd probably sleep in the room because I'd be like, I want to see what happens. But anyway,
you're a glutton for punishment, and we know this about you.
I'm a glutton for punishment. But some other paranormal activities that were reported in the house was garage door opening and closing in the middle of the night. The family would be dead asleep, and all of a sudden the garage doors opening and closing
at 3:15 or like at 3 a.m. maybe when the kid was coming home to kill his family.
Right. And here's another weird one. This would freak me out even more. Somebody kept knocking a knife down in the kitchen. Like you'd be standing in the kitchen and all of a sudden this knife would just fall.
Was it the same knife?
Yeah.
That's creepy. That's super creepy. I wonder what that's connected to.
Yeah. Yeah. There was also a report of now this is, I don't know. Me personally, this is where I start thinking people are talking craziness. There was a report of a pig-like creature with red eyes staring down at George Lutz and one of the children, Daniel, from a window. Me personally, I'm thinking, okay, this is where we're getting a little wacko. There's reports that George walked in to his wife, Kathy, levitating off her bed. The boys, the two of the children, Daniel and Christopher, were also levitating together in their beds.
Okay, I'm sorry. You've listed a lot of things that would have been the final straw for me, but really, my spouse or my children levitating, you touch my family. And first of all, we're getting you the fuck out of this house. But, honestly, first I'm getting the fuck out of the house and then we're coming back.
Like I would not have lasted 28 days.
No, that's ignoring a lot of red flags. I mean, these are people in an abusive relationship with a house and a ghost that should have paid attention to the first couple red flags. I mean, really.
Green news, I'm out. Okay.
Yeah. Get out. I'm out. Levitating. Really.
This is where I don't know. I'm kind of torn a little bit. I believe that a lot of those things could happen. I believe that would make quite an interesting place to stay if all of those things had happened.
Sure.
But there's a couple things now that I'd like to tell you about this that may change your view on the Amityville Horror House.
Okay. Do tell.
So I kind of laid out the basic timeline of what sparked the issue, and the Lutz's timeline of moving in. So we've got November 74, the mass murder of the Defoe family, which, by the way, I'd like to point out, Ronald Defoe just actually died in prison this past March.
Oh,
I
wow.
found that out. Yeah, this past March, he actually died in prison.
2021.
Yep. March of 2021.
The guy who killed his family with a shotgun
Yep. Died in
just
prison.
died in 2021 in prison. Wow. And
Yeah.
he killed his family back in 1975 too.
1974. Yep.
Dang. And I was going to ask you what happened to him. He spent his whole life in prison and just recently died. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So
did he ever, I'll have to look this up, but I'm curious as fuck if he ever talked about why or what possessed him to do that.
That would be interesting because I
right? Like, holy shit, what would make some, but yeah, different podcast, Into the Mind of a Killer.
But this is kind of where the story took a turn for me because, so we've got November 74, the murders happen. Then we've got December of 75, where the Lutzes move in and can only make it 28 days. Now, in the time since then, nothing's really happened with the house. If you remember the movie, The Amityville Horror, that came out in 1979. The book was written, I think, either the same year, 1978, something to that effect.
I guess I've never really thought of that. The movie and the book came out like right after all of this happened.
Like boom, boom, boom. Okay?
Wow. So they like move out of this house and get a book deal ASAP.
So in my opinion, I don't feel that up to this point, I have found enough evidence of spooktacular spookiness to warrant the movie that I remember. Okay.
No, and this doesn't really fit with what you and I have found in some of our research, like prior to the podcast and for the podcast, is a lot of times with the people who have experienced these hauntings, they're usually not the first ones to run out and get a book deal, especially not that quickly, maybe 20 years later or something,
right.
but they usually don't want to talk about it. A lot of these people in places, I mean, the ones that are sensationalized are sensational for a reason, because the people have hyped up small things. Usually the really scary ones, people tend to not talk about. So I'm very, very surprised that these people had such a traumatic experience and then turned around and wrote a book.
A couple things to point out. There was a lot of people who actually questioned the validity of the Lutz's story.
Shocker. I'm not surprised. Right? It's quite sensational.
George and Kathy, the parents, George and Kathy Lutz, took a lie detector test to prove their innocence. They both passed.
Oh, well, lie detector tests aren't that hard actually to pass.
I know you and I know this, but this is just a bullet point for you.
Right.
Here's another thing, though. The couple was bogged down in legal and financial issues, which prompted folks to believe they had a motive to create this fantastical story to get money.
Weren't there psychics that investigated, though?
Yeah.
Did that happen like at the same time, or did that happen before the book was published or after?
It, I believe, would have been in between
the book and the movie.
I think it would have been in between. And the psychics did say that there were unhappy spirits there. Well, of course there were. A family of 6 was slaughtered in bed. Of course they're there and they're pissed. To what extent? Let me keep going.
Okay, let's hear.
The Lutz's former lawyer, his name was William Weber. He had a falling out with them over money issues. And in 1979, he claimed that the 3 of them came up with it over many bottles of wine.
Wait, you're telling me the lawyer is claiming that they made it up over a dinner party? Holy shit. No.
Yeah. But now here's another switch in the opposite direction. Here, the pendulum is going the other way now. One of the children, Daniel, who actually still lives in Queens, New York, he claimed that the house had ruined his life and that he continues to have nightmares to this day.
That fits with growing up in a haunted house.
One of the children, they didn't necessarily say which one, but one of the children said that George had been very deep into the occult and into witchcraft, and that kind of precipitated his embellishments of what really happened. The child did say in 2005, well, he wasn't a child in 2005, but in 2005, one of the Lutz children said that there was an evil in that house and he could never, ever go near that house again, but that the story his stepfather told was very embellished.
Interesting. Interesting. Wow, it's almost starting to sound like there was some haunted stuff and then dad just took it and ran.
It kind of sounds like these people might have made a little bit of it up. Yeah, there could have been some bad stuff there. Yeah, obviously we are aware of a murder of family members there, but slime oozing from the walls, that's very Ghostbusters to me. Very Ghostbusters. I mean, some of this stuff is definitely reasonable to have happened. I can buy into a lot of the stuff here, but the slime oozing from the walls, that's where I start to kind of, I don't want to say roll my eyes, but a little bit.
Yeah, weird pig-like creatures in the attic.
It was most recently sold in 2017, and it seems like the price keeps going down. It was sold for 600,000, which was 200,000 less than the original asking price. But anyway, in the time since the Lutzes, there's been 5 other families, and none of them have really had a problem in the house. It was kind of a buzzkill.
No other experiences?
This was kind of a buzzkill for me. There has really been no other reports. Now, you stated before that it was odd that, George supposedly gets driven from his home with his family by these ghosts and runs right to a book deal.
It just seems odd.
Maybe these families have had experiences and whatnot, because, sometimes you could look at it as having 5 owners in 35, 40 years is a lot, but
True. And the price keeps
no one
going
has,
down. And that's also
right.
odd.
But maybe these people are just too afraid to talk about it.
From what I remember, there were some reputable psychic groups that have gone through that did say that there was activity there. But I think maybe you hit on something saying that
There's activity and then there's slime coming from the wall. Come on now.
right, right. There's activity and the house probably is quite active. There's probably a lot there.
Yeah, I can think of 6 spirits that could be in that house.
Yeah, exactly. 6 reasons why.
But again, you start to lose me at the slime in the half pig, half human thing.
Yeah, that type of thing you tend to usually just see in the movies.
It kind of ends there. And that's the weird thing, looking into the Amityville Horror House. It kind of ends, it begins and ends with the Lutzes. Obviously the story of the Defoes fits in and is a very tragic piece of the puzzle. But as far as paranormal activity, from what I can find, it starts and ends with the Lutzes. To me, that doesn't seem consistent with something that is supposedly as haunted as it was portrayed to be.
Now, I know that sometimes poltergeist activity can center around teens and teens with, emotional issues. And this was a blended family with, kids coming into an environment. So I suppose if you have to stick to the paranormal aspect of it, it's possible that there's like a small haunting there that was exacerbated by teens and by what sounds like a dad who was a little bit too into, that type of dark magic or
dabbling into the occult.
Yeah, so maybe things did happen. I honestly am leaning towards, I think dad embellished most of it, but I do think that there could be quite a few kernels of truth, and it's possible that it was worse with that family, maybe because of the troubled teens or something. The one kid does say he still has nightmares, so maybe there was an emotional component to it too.
But you've got these, you've got 3 witnesses aside from George and Kathy Lutz. You have a Catholic priest who says that something told him to get out. You have an adult child who says he still has PTSD from things that happened in that house. But then you have a lawyer who says that a lot of it was made up over several bottles of wine.
Oh, I'm torn because, a a lawyer who was stiffed, who broke client confidentiality. I mean, it sounds like he broke client confidentiality. A lawyer who would do that, do we really trust his word? I mean,
Right.
this is difficult for me because it really does feel like most likely the dad embellished it all, if not outright
Right.
made up the whole damn thing. And the kids are traumatized because dad had issues
But the
and made
priest
things worse.
and the voice.
But the priest and the voice, yeah, I don't know. This one's a difficult one. I think in my mind, what makes the most sense is a small haunting, maybe exacerbated by the kids, maybe pissed
Right.
off by the priest. I don't know.
Here's another option. If he was dabbling in the occult, he could have had something attached to him that wasn't attached to the house.
Yeah. So maybe it was just the right chemistry of that family at that time in that house.
Right. Because again, unless they're just keeping it from any sort of public knowledge, there's been no reports of any paranormal activity in that house since the Lutzes.
Yeah, that definitely makes me lean towards, I think dad made at least 75% of it up.
So I will say that I was actually kind of disappointed because I'd spent my whole life thinking that this was like some evil portal, and it doesn't sound like it is so much. Haunted, sure. I believe it may be haunted, but I don't believe is as evil, and I don't even know what the other words I want to think of, but I just don't think it's as bad as it was portrayed in Hollywood.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I think you're probably right. Interesting. Well, hey, when you investigate something, that's going to happen, and you have to kind of stay true to that investigation and find out everything that you find out.
I'd rather find out than kind of be oblivious and be one of those folks who didn't know the truth and believed a falsehood.
Yeah, I agree. It was a fun story when we were kids. It's okay to grow out of it. New knowledge.
We're bound out of all these places that we've talked about and are going to talk about. We're bound to find places where it ends up kind of being a bust.
Yeah.
I feel like Amityville Horror House was kind of a little bit of a bust.
Well, that's okay. Hey, we have our first bust. I don't mind. It was scary when I was a kid. It was a scary story.
I know, right? I definitely think tonight that you won the spooky place. This was definitely a West Coast winner.
Oh my gosh, I think so too. It's one of those places that captures your imagination. It captures the attention, the inescapable prison, and holds such torment that it's still haunted, and everyone that goes there can feel it and hear it.
Whereas on my end, I feel almost like the Amityville Horror House ended up kind of being a paranormal flop. I'm glad I looked into it. It was a good story. And in Alcatraz, man, that makes me want to go there, like half want to go there and half be scared.
Our list is getting long, Shell. We're going to have a lot of places we need to go investigate.
We're going to have to turn into like travel people.
Yeah, right.
The traveling ghost hunting podcasters.
I would love to do that. So next week, our episode is the Wednesday before Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
So I thought for that episode, in honor of almost Valentine's Day, I would do a story about the amorous ghost of J. Dawson Hidgepath from Colorado.
Ooh,
yeah.
Intriguing. That'll be a good one.
Yep. Couldn't leave the ladies alone, even in death.
I am actually going to do a personal story that I have personal experience with.
All right, cool. Which one?
This is gonna be. So I am gonna actually. Like I said, I'm gonna do a personal story. And it's Fallbrook Cemetery. This is located right outside of Mansfield, Pennsylvania. I have been there, and I have some insight that is unsettling, and we're gonna talk about it.
Oh yay! I can't wait to hear about it. We're going to hear some Fallbrook Cemetery stories, some Shell ghost hunting stories, and all about...
This was one place that I actually went on a ghost hunting adventure without you. So I'm excited to tell this story.
I'm excited to hear it. Very cool. Very cool. Yes. All right. So I'm looking forward to that one. So we'll have some personal Shell stories and some amorous J. Dawson Hidgepath.
It sounds good. I can't wait.
So thanks for listening. We appreciate all the listeners from every country that has listened.
We have tens of listeners
We
from
still
all
have
around
many
the world.
tens. We have more tens, and
Many
now they are
tens of listeners.
now they are tens worldwide.
And we appreciate it.
We appreciate every single one. So we're ready for next week. We're going to have some good pot. We're going to have some good stories, and we'll see you then.
We'll see you then.
Thanks again for listening to the Stoned Witches Hour. Make sure to like, subscribe, and maybe leave us a review. Check us out next week at 4:20 a.m. for episode 7